Hello, friends. Today I wanted to talk about writing for others, for the opinions of others, versus writing for yourself. And particularly, I want to touch on the impulse to write to the people that criticize you. As we all know, one of the most difficult parts of putting your work out there can be dealing with criticism and knowing when to listen to it versus when to just do your thing. And my experience with this is as a novelist, but I think a lot of this also applies to other types of creative work, whether it's making YouTube videos, making artwork. It's really easy to put more weight on the people that criticize you versus the people that like what you're doing. And this is something I think about now and then, something I have to constantly be checking myself because I really don't want to put more weight on the people that don't like me versus the people that do. Like, ideally, I want to be leaning into the people who already like the direction I intended to go, rather than trying to keep changing things about my natural instincts to please people that don't like what I'm doing. I think I'm much less likely to ever please those people. So they're really not the people that I want to be listening to. But we have a tendency to remember criticism more than praise. And therefore, it's really easy to start veering into appeasing your critics rather than pleasing your fans. This is especially true, I think, kind of like at a point when you don't have like a lot of super fans. You maybe just have some people who are like, oh, I really enjoyed this. But you don't have anybody who's really giving you that like rock solid foundation that you know what you're doing is working. And I've gone through a few different kinds of waves of dealing with other people's opinions. When I started out in traditional publishing, the person I really had to please every time was my agent because all my work had to go through my agent. And I got along really well with my agent. Like, I knew a lot of her other clients. I kind of knew her a little bit before she signed me. I felt like our relationship was kind of very friendly, friendshipy, but, it begins with a contract, and we were both very professional, I think, in our friendship. But nevertheless, like, I stayed at her house one time. We went bowling. We were friendly. So I really had a good sense of her taste, and with every book, it was impossible not to think, would Jen like this? So I was essentially writing every book for Jen. This wasn't the worst thing in the world because Jen had great taste, but it also meant that, I was not always thinking me first. I was often thinking, in what ways does my writing please my agent? Because if she didn't like it, no one was going to see it. She wasn't going to send it to any editors, and that would be that. Even when I had books come out and I got some bad reviews, that hurt, that affected me. It made me wonder if I should do things differently. But ultimately, when I sat down to write the next book, my first thought was still always, will Jen like this? Then I moved into indie publishing instead, and I needed money. So I really had to think a lot about what readers wanted. And I really had to watch the market like a hawk and pay attention to trends and tropes and what people were asking for, and try my best to fulfill all the things that readers wanted. And when you're really trying to make the most money and you're trying to write really commercially, you kind of have to pay the most attention to what are people asking for? What are people clamoring for? Because if you can find a way to give them that, well, you're going to make money. Now I'm in phase 3 where I'm writing more for myself, finally. But I'm not completely unaffected by my audience, because now when I do acquire a reader for the books that really are my books, the things that mean the most to me, I really want to keep them. I really want them to be happy with my work. So it's very hard not to listen to people. I'll get a reader who will say oh, I read all your books and my favorite one was the Cursed Soul trilogy. And then I'll think oh, okay, they really like the Cursed Soul trilogy. I need to really make sure to capture that kind of thing and write more books like that. And then I'll have somebody else say, I read all your books and my favorite was the Potion Dealers. And then I'll think, oh, okay, I need to write more like the Potion Dealers. And then I'll stop myself and think just follow the plan, girl. You're getting readers, you're getting people whose favorites are different books, of course. That's good. That's good if people have different favorites among your books. And I plan to write some that have different kinds of tones. So whatever it is that you like, you're going to get more of it sooner or later. Plus, if people are saying they're reading all of my books, that's a good sign. Even if they liked one better than the other, they still liked them all enough to read all of them. So that's perfect. That's exactly what you want. But it is an awkward relationship between the creator and the fan base or reader base, viewer base, whatever, because we get a lot of opinions these days. If you think about, writers back in the day, critics could have a major impact on a piece of art back when there wasn't like the internet and stuff. Like you'll hear people complain about the critics a lot. Nowadays, we don't have that same relationship with a particular critic. Like in literary fiction, maybe there still might be like the New York Times guy hated it or whatever. I don't know. I'm not in that world. But for the majority of us, it's less about what one particular critic at one particular newspaper or what, Siskel and Ebert said about a movie. It's more about like the Rotten Tomatoes score, the Amazon rating. It's about like what people as a whole said about your work and what they rated it in general. Sometimes I don't know which is worse. Both are stressful in their own way. It sucks to put so much weight on one person's opinion. But on the other hand, the thing about the dreaded Amazon or Goodreads star rating is that it just sits there like a potential black mark on your work if you don't have a good star rating. But it doesn't really track like, is this a book that everybody just thought was meh? Or is this a book that people either loved or hated? There's a huge difference between those two things. Some of the most well-loved books ever have like mediocre star ratings because they're very polarizing, because they affect people deeply in ways that can be positive or negative. Also, sometimes very groundbreaking or unusual books get lower star ratings simply because they did something different that people didn't expect and people had mixed opinions on that. Maybe some people didn't love where the genre is going with this particular book or how this person twisted a trope, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. There's a lot of debate in the writer community about whether you should read your reviews at all. And I used to read all my reviews because I came into it with the idea that this is a good chance to find out if there's anything about my work that isn't connecting with people, something that I can improve with all of my work going forward. Like, what are my weak spots that I need to work on? So I read all of my reviews and tried to get some sort of takeaway of what I was doing wrong. So with each book, I was trying to incorporate, what did I think I was messing up on? What can I improve with the next book? And it did not work at all. No matter what I did, I always ended up in that same place. Even when I started my pen name and moved to a completely different genre, I still ended up getting those same star ratings, like a 3.8 on Goodreads or something. And eventually I had to accept that I am just not a mass people pleaser. I'm not the kind of book that gets a 4.7 on Goodreads. Fourth Wing has a super high star rating, but if you go on YouTube and you look at review videos of Fourth Wing, you would think that everybody absolutely despised this book to the core of their being. Then you go over to the star rating and you'd think this is the best book ever written. Everybody loves it. So it's things like that got me to finally just pull away from opinions of my work entirely and try to think more about what would make this feel to me like I was writing the book that would satisfy me the most. How could I write a book that would stick with me forever? I have my ideal book that you can really sink your teeth into, a fantasy novel that feels really real and that you really get to know the characters, and how can I get closer to that? I want to write books that feel longer and more immersive, but not boring. That's my ideal. So I just started focusing on that goal, improving my craft with that in mind, and just tuning out any other opinion, because people are going to want books to be different things, and you have to pick a lane of this is what I want my book to be, and hopefully it's something that suits you. Then I started this YouTube channel as kind of another creative outlet And it's weird because after years of training myself not to look at reviews, now I'm on a social media platform where I'm creating in a different medium. And on YouTube, you're very much encouraged to look at your comments and engage with the people that watch your videos. So I had to dust off my criticism armor and jump back into the fray and start seeing fresh opinions about me. And we're kind of getting more and more to a world where you might want to avoid opinions about you, but it's getting harder to actually do that. Even in writing, even if you're just a novelist, marketing is shifting more and more to social media platforms where engagement is very important. And therefore, even if you don't read your Amazon reviews, you still might have to engage with comments on your videos, your TikToks, your Instagram posts, and people are sometimes going to give you opinions. It's pretty common for a reader to send you a link to their review of your book and then you click on it and it's like a mean review. So that can be very difficult. Like, what do I do with this kind of engagement? Like, I don't want to censor people's opinions about books. I'm very, very anti-censorship, so I really don't want to make people feel like they have to fawn over me. But at the same time, I really don't want your negative opinions about my books in my head. The main reason being that I tried that already and it didn't help me become a better writer at all. It just made me depressed and like in my head way too much about like, is my pacing too fast? Is my pacing too slow? Are my characters underdeveloped? Are my characters like too developed? Like I started to question everything I was writing way too much when I was deep in my like, I'm going to read my reviews and get better phase. And it didn't make anything better. In fact, I think that I created probably one of my most strained, unfun and unpopular novels while in that headspace. So I really just don't want to engage with those negative opinions unless it's in the context maybe of like a constructive, trusted critique partner. And I do want to clarify that like if you are like one of the people I know in this community who's been reading my books, like sometimes people mention little things to me or ask me questions. Maybe something confused you, anything that can be like semi-critical, but I already kind of have a relationship with you and know that you've been reading and liking my books. Like that isn't the problem. I don't mind that. In fact, sometimes that's actually helpful. So I don't mind that. The problem really is like a complete stranger just like dropping a 2-star detailed review telling you everything that you did wrong, like out of nowhere when you didn't expect it because they just messaged you on Instagram like, hey, I reviewed your book. Or when you're having to read your YouTube comments just for the sake of engagement and you get a lot of opinions about the way you look or your voice or that your videos are too slow or they wish you would do this or that or disagreeing with something that you didn't even actually say, but was in your title because you needed clickbait to get people to watch it in the first place. Like there's so many things that can get under your skin when it comes to creating any kind of content in this modern world with so many opinions coming at you all the time. So what is the best antidote to this? I really think that it is honing a sense of what kind of creator you want to be. There are times when you do need to think about pleasing your audience, like in general, like what do people like? It's hard to completely ignore that. But I think that we all need moments where we kind of step back and ask ourselves, what am I trying to create? What is my voice? What do I know about myself and what I want to say and what my ideal type of creation is? Like, you should be your own first fan and you're really trying to figure out like, what is my ideal thing? How can I get closer to this vision I have in my head of what my ideal art is? And it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like at the very beginning, you usually come in with this really strong sense of self because you kind of need to humble yourself somewhat in order to get yourself out there and improve. But you need to balance that humility and that openness to change and learn with a core sense of being of what you really want to do. And that is a shift that I've kind of slowly been going through over the years, where in the beginning I realized I needed to kind of set a lot of my ego aside and learn how to improve and listen to a lot of opinions. But then as I got deeper into it, I had to kind of start going back the other way and think like, what kind of book do I really want to put out there in the world? Ultimately, I don't want to just write for other people, both because I'll be burned out and I won't feel in the end like I really created something of myself. And that's where, as you get to know yourself a little better, it also starts to become a little easier to know which opinions to listen to and which to not. Like I said, I still struggle with this sometimes because just people will tell me even just casual little things about a book, and I'll want to lean into the things they liked and I'll want to lean out of the things they didn't like. And then the next reader might tell me the complete opposite. And then I'll just be... One example of this playing out is when I first wrote the Cursed Soul trilogy. That was in 2016, and it was my first like adult kind of somewhat well-conceived indie fantasy romance. That book was very near and dear to my heart, but at the same time, I was trying to fit it into a market that I didn't fully understand. So there was a little bit of awkwardness between my inherent voice and the kinds of stories I was inclined to tell as a fantasy author and trying to figure out the indie romance market. I put it out there, and it actually did pretty well, and I got a lot of reviews on it. I got some reviews that were so lovely, like they understood exactly what I was trying to do. I remember this one review I got that was something about like, it really made me think about my own marriage and the nature of like being a woman. And that review kind of clarified the themes of the book for me and just made me like, it was one of the best reviews. It made me so happy because it was like they completely got what I was trying to do. And in fact, kind of explained back to me what I had done, which is just like the most beautiful gift of a review when you get one like that. But then I got another one that said something like, Grau, the main character, I thought he was cool in the beginning, but then it turns out that he's just like a big dork like Sheldon Cooper who lives with his parents. Now, Grau is... He's a sorcerer and he's a bit of a dork. I tend to write characters that are a bit dorky because that's what I like. It's what I identify with. It's what I want in a man. And as I see it, a lot of sorcerers are they're kind of nerds because sorcery involves a lot of like detail work and like understanding nature and, distilling different amounts of things and tinkering. It's kind of like being a scientist. So like, yeah, they're going to be kind of nerdy, but it was the like Sheldon Cooper living with his parents, which thinking of Grau as being Sheldon was like, no. Bazinga. So around, I think 2021, after I'd been writing like a lot of paranormal and fantasy romance novels to market, I had gotten my pen name. I had gotten this whole career going under my pen name, and I'd published the Cursed Soul trilogy under my original name, and I decided I wanted to move those books to my pen name so that my new readers could find them. And I also thought this will be a good chance to like fix a few things because I've learned a lot about the romance market and the fantasy market and just writing books in general, so I'm gonna like tweak it a little bit. Not a ton, but just like, I've learned a few things. And I thought about this review and how it was still bothering me. And I really did not want to make Grau not be a nerdy sorcerer because I love that about him. It was like, that's his character. And I had developed enough of a sense of self at this point that I was not about to change who he was just to make him conform better to typical romance hero. But that review did make me think, the problem with Grau in this original draft is that he is written pretty realistically, probably, as to what a young man would actually do in the situation he's in and the culture he's in. He is in a culture where people don't grow up and rebel against their parents in the way that we would do in the modern Western society as much. So I had written him true to his culture in a lot of ways. But it's supposed to be romantic, and I thought he doesn't really protect Velsa or stand up for her in the way that I think that he should, and that is what's bothering me about it. Not the nerdy sorcerer part, but just that he is the male lead, and I think he should be a little bit exceptional. He shouldn't just be like every other guy in his culture. I want to really root for the two of them, so I'm going to make him be a little more protective of her and stand up for her in ways that put him in a little more tension and danger. So that was like the number one thing that I changed between the original version and the second version. And if you've listened to it on audiobook, you're still getting the original version, which I still love. It's not drastically different, but the print version is now the updated version. So that was an example of a time when I balanced out being true to myself and knowing what I did not want to change, and considering feedback that was just stuck in my head for years, still bothering me. Like, something about it did resonate, and that was still back when I was reading my reviews. So sometimes maybe it's not a bad thing to get that feedback, but you really want to try not to just listen to it just because somebody doesn't like what you did. You still have to try and develop that core self and that core voice so that you can figure out what you really want to change. And when you do think about your audience, ultimately what you're trying to do is to find your people. This is the mindset that I've taken on over the years. When I started out, my thought was, I need to get the biggest audience. I need to become the most rich and famous that I can be, because like, this is my career, and that's what you do with a career, right? You become as successful as possible. So a lot of my decisions were geared toward, how can I become the most successful at my career? But art is not like a lot of other careers. If you focus solely on that for the whole time, it can really grind you down, especially if you got into it in the first place because you had a very particular thing you wanted to do or say, or a very particular type of experience you had with art when you were young that you want to give to someone else. There might only be so much you want to compromise just to become rich and famous. So ultimately, after some years of chasing the fame and wealth, I shifted my mindset into thinking, how can I find my people? And I don't know how many people are my people. I do know that it's not the masses. I know that I'm kind of weird and my people are kind of weird, so that's the way it's going to be. But writing for my people is so satisfying compared to writing for the masses that it is worth the financial cut, in my opinion, especially over the long term. Like, if you can find some way to secure your income in some other way, then you can really get down to just writing for your people. Then it gets very satisfying, even if your audience is smaller. But even if your writing or your art is a little more commercial and you do have to listen more to the masses to some extent, I would still urge you not to get too caught up in the people who don't like you versus the people who do, even though the ones who don't like you often seem so much louder. But the fact is, you will probably never please those people, and you will regret the attempt to do so. So there's my pep talk for the day. And my question for you for this video is, have you ever changed something to please someone else or because of feedback and regretted it? What was it? Or, of course, any other opinions you want to have on this topic. If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove, and I am a fantasy author. If you'd like more from me, I have a Patreon and a Substack, as well as YouTube memberships, and joining a paid tier of any one of those gets you access to 2 bonus videos a month voted on by you guys, and my Discord server where we encourage each other in our writing and other creative endeavors on a daily basis and have a lot of fun. If you'd like to read any of my books, the books of my heart, including the Cursed Soul trilogy, are the ones I recommend first, and that is my Hidden Lands books. I post every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern if you'd like to catch my lives, and thank you so much for supporting the channel and watching my videos as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye!